2 years ago, we heard, I think he was your state director of water conservation, and he was lamenting the fact that 1,000 wells had been closed in Nebraska farmland. And his greatest lament was that 95% of these were new farmers because the water laws are quite old. And apparently the rights to water are a function of how long you've had these rights.
Right.
What changes are you working through within the new institutes you have and communicating with the state to upgrade these so that it's really not counterintuitive to attract this new generation you spoke about,
Right.
who's taking over the
Right.
soil?
Well, the policy arm that I described, we are very fortunate that in our law college there is a fair degree of emphasis on water law, and we have some great people in the law college that have been in that area for a long period of time. What we're hoping is that the institute itself, by elevating this to a completely different level, is that we can be bolder in our scholarship to help inform the state than what we've been in the past. That's what Mr. Dougherty wanted. He wanted the institute to be the mouthpiece, if you will, to really help inform that policy and push that harder. So that's the platform we're working from. You know, it doesn't directly address the how we're going to do that, but that's the philosophy with the way we're approaching it. So we're asking those faculty, obviously going out and trying to hire a director of policy to put focus around that. It's part of that strategy to really step up in the discussion about that in a much more direct way. I think there is now a growing recognition in the state. You know, $14,500 land's great, but there is a growing recognition in the state now of how are you ever going to get in agriculture in the state with $14,500 land, right? And so when you have we have a unicameral, we've got a kind of a unique state legislative body. We have a unicameral that's supposed to be bipartisan. It amazes me that it doesn't really work that way, but it is a unicameral. And in the 42 senators that are in our unicameral, there are a decreasing number of them that are rural senators, but there are still a substantial portion of them that are. And it's been interesting to watch in the last 3 years the shift in the thinking about those rural senators around water issues. They're paying attention to this in a way that they weren't before. So maybe that's altruistic in thinking about how we hope it works, but we're hoping by putting emphasis there and by elevating it in the awareness level, even locally for us, that we're able to have a bigger stamp on informing that policy. And you're all familiar with, Kansas, and we in Kansas have been fighting over water forever, and it's getting worse. So, great question. Yes, in the back.
I have a question about I'm pretty interested in the Nebraska Water Management Network you mentioned before.
Yes.
So for the network, what's your definition for that term? Because there are so many disciplines trying to start a network. For instance,
Right.
economists trying to start a network from the observation of the farmers' outcome, our words,
Right.
action. For engineering, they trying to start a network from the interactions. So for here, for your project, what's the network here?
Yeah, so the Ag Water Demonstration Network that I referenced, and you saw that was over the last 5 years that it's developed to having the network locations where we do have that monitoring ability now on soil and water resources. The initial phase of it was to get the distribution of people in the network engaged. So Dr. Ermock, who I mentioned earlier, he's an irrigation specialist, he's an irrigation engineer, but his impetus originally was to get placement of people so that you had this 500,000 acres with, I think there are about 535 farmers now spread across the state into that network with the capability to make measurements associated with their technology use. So the initial phase of this has been to get the locations and the data points, right? And to get it to a scale where we have enough to work from. The other social aspects that you're referring to, so adoption of technology, influences of adoption on technology, learning from one to another, all of those kinds of networks is the next step. And he hasn't, so the first years that I showed you the data from, the getting to 500,000 acres and 500 plus farmers in the network was to build the data network out there to then build the next steps from.
Okay, maybe one more question.
Here?
Yeah, my question is about the title of your talk, which is "Water is the New
Yeah,
Oil."
yeah, I didn't really refer to that, did I?
And it struck me as, I hear people say that, but on the other hand, there seems to be cultural and social attachments to water
Right.
that we don't necessarily have with oil.
Right, right. Yeah, let me tell you the genesis of that verbiage. I showed you the slide of the 4 ag secretaries. During that dialogue, so the way we set that up is we had these 4 ag secretaries sitting on the center, the stage of our Center for the Performing Arts. And there's about 2,000 people in the audience. And Jeff Rakes, the CEO of the Gates Foundation, and I were having a conversation with them about issues around agriculture, past, present, future, right? Dan Glickman, who was Ag Secretary under President Clinton, in that course of that conversation got into the water dialogue, started talking about the real issues related to water, same kind of conversation I had here, and he made the statement of water is the new oil. Okay, so that's where the verbiage came from. But I agree with you that it's very different than oil in terms of the context of it as a resource to be conserved and the cultural aspects around it. So that's where the verbiage came from. I toyed with, when Aaron asked me for a title a few weeks ago, I gave it to you because it was like the 2 days after that lecture with Dan Glickman, and it left such an impression on me that I thought it's a great turn on words. And then when I was looking at it at 2:30 this morning, I was on a delayed flight in 3 o'clock this morning into Lansing. I was looking at it this morning and I thought, that verbiage isn't really perfect for that reason. It's the metaphors maybe not as good. It's, in terms of value, long-term value, I think he's right. I think it has longer-term value than oil has, but the metaphor has some mixed messages.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have a reception. We have a lot of stuff set up over there, and we can continue the conversation over coffee and some food.
Thank you.
Thank you.